To ask one question is to ask every question. Objections are the love language of philosophers. Know the rules before you break the rules.
Welcome to the Strength Connection podcast, a show to share stories, insights, and experiences in strength, physically, mentally, and spiritually. I'm Michael Krukowski, host of the Strength Connection, and I'm so grateful that you can join me today. So in these episodes, I connect with some of the most inspiring and successful individuals to chop it up and learn from true life experiences that have helped them become who they are, the strongest versions of themselves. One of the greatest ways I've always learned the most important lessons is through stories. We all have them, and they make us who we are. So let's dive in. Here we go. In this episode, my man Pat Flynn is back for the first ever trilogy guest on the Strength Connection. For those who don't know Pat, best way I can describe him is a Renaissance man. He's a coach, an author, a musician, philosopher. He's a father of 5 and continues to excel in all these areas to the highest degree. In this episode, Pat talks about finishing his most recent book, his first ever on philosophy, starting his next book on fitness, and his take on minimalism and the best ways to train in all areas of life. So I always leave every conversation with Pat learning so much, and this was no different. So with that, let's get right to it. Before we do, please show your support for the podcast. Make sure you subscribe and rate wherever you're listening, and also on our YouTube channel, The Strength Connection. Your support means everything to me. I sincerely appreciate you. All right, thanks so much. Now let's get on with the show. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Pat Flynn, what's up, man? It is good to see you.
What is up, my friend? Well, it's a beautiful day here in Wisconsin. We have like 3 very pretty months per year, so I'm planning on enjoying it later. Mutual friend of ours is out visiting me, Aleks, Salkin, so we've been hanging out swinging kettlebells, but all good things, my friend. How about you?
It's doing great, man. Yeah, I got to, take a look at the Hebrew Hammer over there for a minute, and it's always good seeing him as well. So guys just hanging out, just kind of, enjoying each other's time for the holiday.
Yeah, me and Aleks are very, if you haven't noticed, like fly by the seat of our pants. So, I won't see him for a while, and then I'll get a message like, hey, can I come out to Wisconsin like tomorrow? And I'm like, sure, come on out. So here he is. Yeah.
Oh, that's the best friendships, right? It's just like, all right, let's get together. So
yep.
That's great, man. Yeah. Well, I said that we're in rarefied territory on this podcast. You are the first trilogy member of the podcast. This is part 3.
Dude, what an honor. I know this was our trilogy. I didn't know this was the first trilogy. So
yeah, I had
prepare to be disappointed, audience.
Well, it's trilogy. Anything can happen in the third one. So we had a couple on the breakthrough secrets. And then when I started this one, it's because last time, I think it was episode 99 we did, which I loved. And then we did another one in like the 40s, and now we're almost to the 200s, now. So it's definitely been a journey, but dude, I think I've said this every time we chatted before on this, and it's the truth. So I always say it again. You were one of the first guys that I really followed on the writing piece when I got into coaching like 15 years ago, when you were doing the Chronicles of Strength blog, and just seeing how you were breaking things down, kind of simplifying these things, and that was, as well as putting them to practice. You were a huge influence when I really first got into, coaching and kettlebell training and everything there. So to be able to converse and to jam with you as a friend is always an honor.
Oh, well, thanks, man. That means a lot. And I hope I didn't send you down too many crazy paths, but no, seriously, it means a lot. And we are friends, Mike, and I appreciate that. And I always love coming on and chatting with you.
Yeah, no doubt. So last time we talked, we labeled it be extreme to be better, where we talked really about kind of going down those deep rabbit holes of stuff, which I thought was really interesting, because you're in so many different realms of stuff, from, the work that you've done in fitness, as well as philosophy, music, got 5 kids, all different spectrums, and still maintaining everything. It's always really interesting to hear about, how you keep everything, balanced and still be successful.
I don't totally sync. Yeah. You don't see all the behind the scenes, my friend. You see the social media.
Absolutely. Yeah. We just get to see the highlights of it and stuff, but as well as, your podcast with, especially the ones that you do with legendary coach Dan John is always a blast.
Right.
I love the stuff you guys do, because you speak a lot in like simplifying general terms. And I think for coaches, I can speak for myself, I've been doing this for a long time. Sometimes you think that everybody knows the basic stuff all the time because you've been doing it for so long, and you can get in your own head. And then you see how you guys do it with the Q&A and having people ask questions. And some of them are very general, but being able to answer those specifically, I think is so powerful to do. So I love the way that you guys, put that together. I was going to ask, do you guys have like specific kind of frameworks beforehand, or do you guys really more kind of just get on and just start jamming?
Dan is just like me and Aleks. It's like, hey, we're going. Here's an idea like 5 minutes ahead of time. Does it sound good to you? Oh yeah, sounds fine to me. And then we just rock and roll, right? I mean, it's kind of like this, right? We didn't plan anything out.
Exactly.
As long as you have, somebody who's got good energy and is interested in the same things that you are, chances are you're going to have a pretty good conversation. And I like spontaneity. I enjoy that when there's not too much. Sometimes it helps to have a little bit of structure, right? Like if you're writing a philosophy paper, for example. But
we'll get right back to this episode. But first, I want to tell you about Nabosu Technology. Nabosu is the leading company in foot care products created by the top functional podiatrist and human movement specialist, Dr. Emily Splickle and her team. Our feet are a connection to the earth and the foundation of all human movement. And it's often the most overlooked part of our body when it comes to health, fitness, and recovery. Personally, I never thought much of how the foot impacts my movement and strength until years ago when I found my intense sciatic pain I was dealing with was coming from a locked up midfoot and ankle issue. So after putting emphasis on this, my pain subsided completely. And since then, I've made sure to take care of my feet before anything else in training. I use the Nabosu NeuroBall every day, whether I'm training or not, and I felt significantly better in both my barefoot strength training as well as running outside on grass and on pavement. Nabosu has the best products on the market, including the NeuroBall, recovery socks, splays, activation insoles, and the kinesis boards and mats. So to check out Nabosu Technology, click on the link in the comments or go to nabosutechnology.com and use the code CONNECTION and get an additional 10% off your purchase. Again, that's the code CONNECTION. Use it to get 10% off. All right, now let's get back to it.
Otherwise, I like to kind of keep the boundaries pretty wide, give a lot of room to play. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and that's when the things come right to you at the moment too, and you explore the best ideas, I think, from that spontaneity, having a little framework, but playing inside that framework. Right. Yeah. So, you told me beforehand, you just finished this book, which last time we spoke, you were right in the middle of a lot of like the meat of it from there. So how's it feel this was your first philosophy book that you
it is. I've done a lot of writing in philosophy, and I'm still cranking out some academic articles on obscure topics. I just was finishing up a paper I got to revise and resubmit on this morning. But this was the first, full book that I put together, and it's in the realm of philosophy of religion. And people will sometimes be confused by that because they'll think philosophy of religion is this just a bunch of religious people? And I am a religious person, but the answer is no. It's not that at all, and it's not like some comparative religion department. So I'll try not to make this too boring, but philosophy of religion is really where a bunch of philosophers go. And they try to construct a worldview. And a worldview is like a big picture of everything. It's like a theory of everything from a philosophical perspective. Like, how do we make sense of causation and human persons and morality and why anything exists at all? And there's different theories out there, right? So my book is on worldview comparison. And I kind of take up what I think are the two best theories, which are a classical theistic theory, which is shared by many religious worldviews, but also very traditional thinkers like Plato and Aristotle in the broad outlines, right? And a sort of reductive naturalism or materialism. And the whole book is kind of going through explaining what these worldviews are, and then also explaining why this is important, why this is serious work, and why science can't adjudicate this in principle. Science can inform us in some areas of this inquiry, but this is like further back or deeper down than where science can reach, for example. Like, this is a properly philosophical investigation. And then I outlined the different things that worldviews need to explain. And then I talk about theoretical virtues. What do we look for in a worldview? And this is kind of scientific. We look for theories that are simple, have good explanatory power, aren't contrived, stuff like that, right? And then I go through the stuff that needs to be explained, and I say, hey, classical theism actually does better on everything, right? And it's a simpler theory. So if you're into this, you should go this way, right? That's what the whole book is about. Yeah.
It is. Well, I think it's like, I think everybody in some way is interested in that worldview, right? It's like, it's the big questions of world. And a lot of people find it in a lot of different ways. And I think, some people can just find one and it makes you feel good at that moment. And you're like, okay, this is the way. But exploring all the different, great thinkers, I've been, personally, very deep into, work of Lao-Tzu and, Confucius and on that world. And you find things there, but then you find a lot of the same principles in Christianity or, Judaism, like all these different ones. It's like, they're all trying to answer the same questions here. They might be arriving at it differently, but in order to get it down and curated, I think everybody is interested in that in some degree.
Well, yeah, naturally. And I make that argument at the beginning of the book. It's like, look, we're going to get into some obscure philosophical argumentation. And at certain points, you probably want to throw your hands up and be like, what the hell is the point of all of this? Right. And I'm like, well, don't forget, your worldview. First off, your worldview is something you can't have. Right. Everybody's got a lens. Right. That they see the world through, how they make sense of reality. And, what they value, what they pursue. Those are all worldview commitments. The question is, have you made that philosophical turn? Have you made that critically reflective turn back where you begin to question your worldview? And so I kind of argue, like, look, you can't escape from having a worldview. You just can escape from having a coherent one, right? Or one that makes sense, right? So if you think that, you kind of want to try and get at the truth as best as you can, we're all fallible, I admit that, then start thinking about this seriously. But not only that, but the biggest, most important questions to us are really worldview questions. They're not scientific questions, right?
Yeah. They're
questions of like, who are we? What is human identity? What is a human person, right? Morality, right? Is there a moral landscape, right? What is the study of ethics is really going back to Aristotle, to study the good life. Is there such thing as a good life? What is that? That links up to a worldview consideration. So you have identity, morality, origin, destiny. Where do we come from, if anywhere? Where are we going, if anywhere? These are questions that, again, all of us sort of, even if we haven't answered them explicitly, we orient our lives to certain answers to those questions, right? So yeah, the philosophical argumentation can get very deep and obscure, but it links up with things that we're all deeply concerned about. Right. And to me, that's why I'm interested. That's why I got into philosophy, man, because it became pretty clear to me early on that like the questions I cared about most were questions that could only be answered like over here. Right. In this area of philosophy, and it really just was how, now in specialized departments of philosophy, it's called philosophy of religion or metaphysics, something like that. But like, it was just philosophy, right? Through most of history. Like that's just what philosophy was. and they were generalists, right? Aristotle, Plato, all those guys. Yeah.
Right. It's interesting. I got a chance to speak with a guy named Rafe Kelley yesterday. I don't know if people heard him, but he created the program Evolve, Move, Play. He's one of the pioneers of parkour in the world, but he's also an incredible historian of human movement and philosophy. And he gave this distinction that I've been thinking about since we chatted about the difference between complicated and complex, where it's like complicated is just like it says, it's complicated, but it's trying to arrive at one specific answer. I think he kind of used the analogy of like space travel, like getting out to space. Like it's complicated. There's a lot of math you need to figure out in order to do that, but it's all roads lead to Rome. You're trying to get there. Where a complex problem is there's a lot of different answers. There's a lot of different ways you can arrive at it. And he used like the analogy of playing chess. It's like there's more ways to win at chess based on all the movements than there are like electrons in the universe. It's like it's so insane. And I correlated that a lot into the stuff with like health and fitness. It's like where a lot of confusion comes together, where it kind of is similar on philosophy, where it's like everybody thinks there's one way to lose weight or there's one way to get strong. And it's like, so they think it's complicated. It's not, it's just complex. Where you've been, what your life situations have been like is going to lead you to a different, way. And that's where I think a lot of the dogmatic debates and stuff like that and zealots come out of, like, this is the only way to do it. But in reality, no, it's not a complicated issue. It's a complex issue.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So those are good distinctions, right? And that's what philosophers do, like annoyingly so. It's like draw distinctions upon distinctions upon distinctions, right? Now, some things are like pretty black and white, right? Like either this is true or it's not, right? But to determine that can be quite a complicated or complex affair, right? Yeah. And if you've ever tried to debate a philosopher on anything, you'll quickly realize that what might seem like a simple question to answer almost certainly isn't, right? And so I appreciate that, and I recognize that. It's like, look, like at the end of the day, this is a yes or no answer, as long as you don't believe that like there could be like true contradictions or something like that, which some philosophers will argue for. It's like even that isn't right. So like everything you think is safe in like in the world like is not safe for philosophers, which is what makes philosophy so exciting. They'll challenge everything you could possibly believe, right? But let's just say, okay, all right, that there is like it's either a yes or a no, right, or something, right? But to get there, right, To get there, that's where the debate is really had, right? Are these arguments good, right? And then every argument has different steps, and every step has sub-steps. And, they say in philosophy, and I think this is true, certainly I learned, to ask one question is to ask every question, right? Because ultimately everything sort of links up and everything is connected. So just get ready to have it be a lifelong process of seeking the truth and refinement and course correction. And hopefully over time, you don't just get knowledge, but you get understanding, and eventually what everybody wants and should seek is wisdom at the end of the day as a philosopher. And so in the book, I say, like, this is complex, and I don't think I can give any one knockdown argument that won't have steps that somebody can challenge in some reasonable way. So the best I can do is give a cumulative case and show how one worldview can explain a whole bunch of stuff with kind of a simple root theory. And this is another thing related to complexity, because sometimes people, we hear, and this is true we'll tie it into fitness, but everybody looks for simple theories, but few people ask why. And this is something I talk about in the book. Well, Occam's razor, right? We shouldn't multiply entities beyond necessity to explain the data. Okay, why? Why not? Right? Why not? So I kind of try and get into the philosophy of that, but like, why is simplicity a sort of guide to truth, right? And where does simplicity matter, right? Does it matter like on a fundamental level? Does it matter just all throughout? And I kind of argue it matters most on the fundamental level, but the simple answer, I think, which is actually a very complicated answer, but I think simply stated, is that the simpler something is, the less likely that it will go wrong. And I use a couple ways to illustrate this. So imagine that is this interesting, Mike, by the way? Otherwise we can turn to something else.
Oh, 100, dude. This is
sometimes people just don't care about this.
No
stuff.
way.
I get excited.
Yeah, I am so
a simple stock example, right? Yeah. You go outside and your driveway's wet. You're like, well, why is my driveway wet? Well, here's a simple theory. My sprinkler turned on, right? But then somebody else comes along like, well, okay, maybe. But here's another theory. 20 kids came by with buckets of water and 2 birds flew overhead and spit, right? Both of them explain the data, right? They cover the data. But most people would say that second theory it doesn't seem right. Like, why? I should just go with the sprinkler. Why? Well, it has something to do with the number of moving components and the probability that the more kind of moving components you have, the more ways things could go wrong and turn out to be false, right? So that's kind of, I articulate this at greater length in the book, but I'm saying it's a matter of probability, right? That theories that are more internally complex have more ways to go wrong and more ways to turn out to be false. So they're less likely to be true, but that doesn't mean they're absolutely not true. It could still be true, right? But as a general rule or guide of like theory selection, this is why simplicity is sort of it's a good general, not absolutely infallible, but a good general rule of thumb.
Right. No, I love that explanation. And what I love about it too is, I personally enjoy philosophy, but I think even if you're not like so deep into like that genre, what you just explained there is just the practice of thinking through something, even if you think that you know about it, like this is the right answer, to still ask why do I think that's right? I think that has so much merit in so many different levels of life mastery.
Yeah, and for sure. How many times do people just throw out Occam's razor, right? Most people have no idea who Occam even is. and they also don't know that it actually goes back to Aristotle more than it does.
Yeah, you say it at a party and people think you read.
But why? Why shouldn't I just go with the more complicated theory? Right? And that is not itself an easy thing to answer. I spent a lot of time thinking through that, and what I gave you, I think, is like the succinct summary of what I think the correct answer is, but and you have philosophers that totally reject that. Like the simplicity thing, it's totally overrated. We need to get over it, right? Yeah. So nothing's ever, again, and that's the complexity of it, right? It's either true or it's not, that simplicity is a general guide to truth, but trying to actually adjudicate that debate, you'll have some really smart people that will give you some good counter arguments, right?
Yeah. It's funny when my father's mother, my grandmother, passed, she was one of the women that she just loved education and just conversation and arguing. And as everybody was kind of getting together, a couple of my uncles were saying that she would just bring up stuff at the dinner table, not even like knowing them that well, yet, because they dated her daughters, but she would just take the opposite side of arguments just to like have the debate about it. And they'd be like, well, what do you think about this? She's like, oh, I agree with you. And they're like, well, then why have we been having this debate? So I just thought it'd be a fun thing to
explore. And I'm
Of
like,
course.
that's such a, I don't think it's a lost art, but I do think that we don't have it as much anymore of like just
Yeah.
questioning the things that we do, believe true. Me and you have both been kettlebell practitioners forever. It's like we can just say this is the best, tool. But if you don't constantly just ask why or like actually delve into that, then either one, there might be something that is better that you didn't know about before, or you go back to, okay, yeah, this was the right answer. And it actually, you double down on it, actually solidifies your knowledge base of it even more. So that's why I think just that questioning of things is just the natural path of
Yes.
mastery. Once you like kind of get through that knowledge base, find to actually have wisdom behind something is you need to challenge your own belief structures.
Well, I mean, she definitely has the philosophical spirit, right? And we often say it, philosophers speak in objections. Objections are the love language of philosophers. Why? Well, not because they're just trying to be super annoying, which we often are. But it's the idea of something like this, right? Like I want to believe true things, and I believe this thing that I think is true because I have arguments and reasons for it. Well, let's test those arguments and reasons, right? Are they actually good? Objections are like argument testers. We're testing the strength of like this bridge of reason because we don't want a weak one, right? We want a strong one. And so that's sort of the spirit that I think you just gave us that like even if you already believe this thing, right? There's value in going out and trying to break it, right? To see if it actually is true. But let me be clear, like that is for a lot of people, that's a very scary thing. And it's a very difficult thing to do. Even for me, it's a scary and difficult thing, right? You're being honest. Why? Because you get comfortable in certain structures. Sorry, I'll try and get my camera to focus there. You get comfortable in certain structures. Shoot, man, like you form your life and friendships around certain structures and beliefs. And the idea that some of these might be wrong or false, you have to give them up or change them, right? There's a lot at stake oftentimes, especially when it comes to like big ticket, commitments and stuff like that. So it's not easy to go and seriously try and question the things that you have so committed yourself to. But I think it is necessary if you want to be virtuous, right?
What was this process like of writing this book? Because you've been a writer for a long time and you've been, into, your own personal study of religion and philosophy for a while, but putting together and curating a book is something very different. Did you follow a similar process or was this something that felt like a completely different animal for you?
Oh man. Well, in terms of the philosophical writing, I guess the process was fairly similar, but like I said, people see the social media highlights. You don't see the ugly behind the scenes. I mean, this sucker has been in the making for like 5 to 6 years with lots of false starts, lots of rewrites, just like anything I do, I think I have something and then I just throw the whole thing out and I start again. And, but this particular, book, I've been working on it for over a year now, and I did rewrite the entire thing one time, which is pretty good for me. I usually rewrite all my books at least 3 times, right? Including that green one right here. That one got I just rewrote that, and not because that was tough like the philosophical book. The philosophical book is different because it's like there's a ton of research. And I kind of know where I'm going and stuff like that. So there are some sort of structures there. Whereas this book about generalism was me just trying to like create something from dust. You know what I mean? So they're very, very different, like very different projects, right? One is like a very kind of academic, structured research project where I'm trying to, contribute to a particular field. Whereas this is like more art. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. You're really creating it from nothing.
Yeah, just like I'm really just trying to like whisk something in, from nothing, I guess, which I argue actually is not possible in my book. It's in violation of a certain principle, but yeah, something like that. And they're both very difficult for me, and they're both excruciating in different ways, and they both have a very sort of different process. So for the philosophy book, I it's a bit more structured. I, have my thesis and I have my outline and the different things. And it's a very structured process, which kind of goes against my personality in many ways. Whereas this book was very like free form, kind of right by the seat of my pants, just try and just get out as many thoughts as I can and shape them later type of deal. So, and it's taught me that if you're doing the sort of thing I am as a journalist, like, yeah, you should be able to do both of those. And I would say the same thing as a musician, right? There's a time where you just need to play a very structured piece of music, and there's a time when you need to just be able to jam and improvise. And
Right.
both of those, I think, are aspects of a well-rounded musician. And so I guess maybe there's a parallel there with the different writing projects I've done. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a beautiful comparison, because I think it's an easy debate of like structure versus more intuition and flow. And sometimes you feel a little bit more energized in one versus the other, but they both need to be in congruence with each other. One doesn't work without the other one. It's like you can be the best basketball player in the world, but if you don't have rules of like, a basketball court and a hoop and, fouls and stuff like that, you're not playing basketball anymore.
That's right.
It's
That's
not
right.
an actual game.
Yeah, my music theory teacher just always used to pound this in our head. She would say, know the rules before you break the rules. Know the rules before you break the rules, right? And that's something I've come to appreciate very much more over the years, right? If you start trying to improvise before you've really, put in your 10,000 hours, learning the theory, learning the rules, and just building your chops, you're not going to be improvising. You're just going to be serving slop,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Kerry Campbell says that all the time in a mastermind. Learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist later.
That's right. Yeah,
that's exactly it. So now philosophy's now you're going back into writing a new fitness book, which
Mhm.
is it right at the beginning stages? Are you in the middle of that? How's that?
Haven't even written a single word yet, my friend.
Beautiful. Okay.
Contract assigned. Yeah, I decided like I needed like a month between my books, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like all my hair doesn't go gray, right? So and yeah,
And it's been a while. It's been a while for you on that side.
About 10 years since I've written a fitness book. The green one here, How to Be Better, has a section on fitness in it, but I haven't written a full fitness book since probably like 2013, 2014 with my last For Dummies book. And I thought I had said everything I kind of want to say. But as we were saying behind the scenes, I think, in 10 years, I think I have, evolved or refined enough that I have something, to say that I haven't already said before. So this book, I can probably tease it. I don't think it's like a super secret. It will be called Strong On. We're just working on the subtitle. So it will be Pat Flynn's fitness philosophy of minimalism and generalism. So it'll be my ability to sort of like articulate, hey, you want to be a generalist, good to great, or at least fairly competent at many things, and you want to take a minimalist approach to getting there. This is the book for you. So kettlebells will certainly make an appearance in it as well. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How would you, if you could define and distinguish between those two, like what is minimalism in your mind and what is generalism?
Yeah. So this is good because this is what I will be talking about in the book. So I think of generalism as like the target or the outcome, like we want to be generalists. I think as minimalism as the method.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. This is how we
do. This is the to be.
Yeah, no, that's right. Right. Like minimalism. Okay. Something like finding the ideal intersection between effectiveness and efficiency. And like you define it in such a way that it's like, well, duh. Why wouldn't you want to do again? When would you ever want to be like ineffective or inefficient? Right.
Right.
But the point I try to make is like, well, you never want to be, but we often are. Right. And so we have to continually reorient ourselves and constantly go through this process of cutting and prioritizing and making sure that what we're doing really is trying to find that ideal intersection of effectiveness, which I think of as doing the right things on the one hand, and efficiency of doing things right on the other. So like crude fitness example, I want to build upper body strength, right? Well, maybe running isn't the most effective thing for that, right? But here's the deal. You might be a really efficient runner. So you might be doing the wrong thing, right? But it's still the wrong thing, right? On the other hand, you might be doing military presses, pretty effective for building upper body strength, right? But you might be really inefficient in how you program it, your technique, all that sort of stuff, right? So it's making sure that we're not only doing the things that are most conducive for the outcomes that we want, but we're also dialing it in such a way that we're not being wasteful in our efforts, right?
Yeah. I would think that I think the majority of people, understand generalism a little bit more than they do minimalism. Minimalism seems like I've talked about this with a few different people. I talked about it with Coach Dan John, where minimalism's like, you still need to put in effort behind it. I think that sometimes gets a little bit lost in the mix of minimalism from there. So it's like, that's always been kind of an interesting topic of what is that kind of right kind of metrics to use for minimalism? Well,
it's the least versus little, right? Minimalists are always about doing the least, but the least might mean doing a lot, right? So I put up a post on my Substack. My Substack's mostly philosophy, but I put up a fitness post. If people want to check out, it's called The Fitness Plan You've Been Looking For. And it was really to like my philosophical audience. Cause like, all these guys, like I get from my because for people who don't know, I run different channels of philosophy on a fitness one. So I actually get a lot of fitness questions from the philosophy people. And I'm always like, I got another channel for that. But they annoy you enough at some point. It's like, okay, here's a fitness plan. Go do that. Right. But then like all my fitness audience found it and started talking about it. Right. But one of the guys commented, because it's a program for actually trying to put on some muscle. And he's like, boy, for a minimalist plan, this is a lot more than easy strength. And it's true. It's a lot more than easy strength. Mm-hmm. But easy strength isn't for building muscle, right?
Yes.
Like you're missing the point here, friend. Like there were certain requirements that had to be met. And for muscle to be built, our best understanding is like you need somewhere between like 10 to 15, maybe even more if you're advanced, hard sets per week to put some layers on you, like legit. And easy strength just isn't enough. It's just not. And like Dan John isn't going to be offended by that because he's going to say easy strength isn't for muscle, right? So it's always has to have, to answer what is minimalist or not depends on what are you trying to do, right? Mm-hmm. So I have this plan that's for building muscle, and look, I tried to like take out all the inessentials and make it as minimalist as possible. The truth is, if you want to get those outcomes, it's still a hell of a lot of work, right? It's a good amount of volume.
Yes.
3 days per week, 3 to 4 big heavy sets, reps are a little bit higher around 10ish, still pretty basic stuff. But yeah, it just is to highlight your point. It's like, okay, yes, it's a lot more work and time than something like easy strength. But the person was thinking of minimalism just means doing very little. And that's not right. Minimalism is what is the least I need to do to make sure I'm hitting my target. Right. And look, the truth is any worthwhile target, the answer is going to be a lot. Right. It's always going to be anything good is hard. That's it. Right. Anything good is hard. You just want to make sure you're not being wasteful in your pursuit.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really like the way that you put that of least versus little. I think that's such an important distinction of understanding. It's like where, minimalist, it sounds really good, specifically if you're looking for that shortcut based route. What is the fastest way or the easiest way or the simplest way? But as you said, like just the least you need to do, well, you still need to do enough in order to get to the results. And that's where it's kind of asking why. It's kind of like another layer deeper. It's not just like, okay, this is it right here. You're probably gonna have to play with that a little bit to see what is the best volume to do. I remember following some of Powell's old plans, and it is very minimalist. Like, his rite of passage plan is very minimalist. It's a shitload of volume that you do. And I found out like I was not in a good kind of just body frame to do that much volume. I wasn't getting the benefits of it. And that's where I was like, okay, I'm actually better with a little more high intensity, lower volume than low intensity, really high volume. And some of those workouts, they're still taking 45 minutes to an hour to get done, to get through ladders of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of doing presses.
Yeah, man, I'm with you, man. The volume, it wears on me. The more kids and books I write, especially. But my general rule is this: if I'm following a program like the one that I have on my blog, depending on what else is going on in my life, the adjustment for me is either 2 or 3 days per week, right? If I'm in the middle of like cranking out a book and the kids are up all night, because there's always one, right, that's keeping you up at night, I'm going to have 2 hard and heavy volume days. And I'll do like other stuff, some lighter stuff throughout the week, conditioning, maybe a metabolic complex, something like that. But like the real lifting routines, 2. If I push to 3 with a bunch of other stress in my life, I'm dead, man. Like straight up, right? Especially like we're talking like a real volume,
like
program.
Volume work,
yeah. But then if I shift down to 2, I'm good. And then like when other things lighten up in life, like now would probably be a good time for me, like in between book projects and the weather's nice and there's not too much craziness going on. I can kind of like crank it up to 3, and I will benefit more physically from that. Like an extra day of training is not insignificant if you have things tuned in. And that's a theme I actually talk about in the Green Book too. Is like this like as a generalist, you have to learn to surge and maintain. Right. This is how you kind of improve in different areas. Right. At certain times in your life, like when you're writing a book and you're doing a lot of research, like this is where you're surging. This is where you want the breakthrough. This is where you want a PR. Okay. You can't do that in all areas of your life at all times. You will you will die, or you'll at least burn out, but you'll probably just die, right? I would anyways. So what you have to do is you have to just learn to maintain those other things. And, whatever they are, if it's the gym, it's the business, right? If you're running a business or your career, right? You're not trying to suck at them. Like, you don't let them go. That's the mistake. You have to find some like good maintenance level where you just can hold on to what you got, or even be okay with it sinking a little bit. That's another thing that people need to like get over. Like, it's okay if like your skills, get a little bit rusty, because look, you can come back and boost it right back up. It's not a big deal, right? But people like have this weird and I say people, this has happened to me, man. I had to get over this too. It's like, man, if I can't be the best at all times, then to hell with it. I'm not going to do it at all. And that's a recipe for just never being a great generalist, right? You'll hit this like peak, and then you'll just let it go forever. Right. Then never. And that's not the mentality you want to be in. So you have to get in this. If you're trying to be a master of many things, not just a jack of all trades, but truly a master of many things, you have to learn to have phases and cycles of your life where you can push really hard in one area and still push hard in others, but maybe not as hard as you were at other times, if that makes sense.
Oh, 100. Absolutely. I've used the analogy of the highway of strength with people I've worked in, where you have your 3 lanes. The left lane is the surge, like you talked about. Like, that's when you can push pedal to the metal and you're going faster. Right lane is like cruise control. Okay. Maybe there's a lot of stuff going on. And then middle lane somewhere in the middle. And I always said, like, everyone might be at different speeds, but they're all still moving forward.
That's a great analogy, by the way. I love that illustration.
Yeah. And what I've tried to do with people is like, you take each thing, like, okay, where's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and kind of break those down. The more you can get aware of all those different things. Yeah. Maybe it's a good time to physically surge. Like, you have more time, you got a lot of energy, and you want to really push to get some body composition changes or really maximize your strength. Where other times, like, I remember when I started this new business like a couple of years ago, and I needed a lot of mental faculties to do all the things you do. That's when I went more like an intuitive approach of training, where it was very kind of lane work. It's
but
like,
you didn't let it go, and that's what's so commendable. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not at my peak in deadlifting right now, but that's totally okay, right? But what has always like sort of shocked and offended me, and you can't really I'm not offended, but like all the fitness people who would go and start a business and then got hella fat, right? It's like, come on, guys. You like, if you're going to be teaching other people how to like have a sustainable approach to fitness, like, you gotta kind of walk the walk somewhat here, right?
Oh yeah. Well, and you start to everything when you start to do that, I can't help but think that you start to become a persona. Like, you're not acting as that person if you're speaking about these healthy things, and intrinsically that you're not doing it yourself. Like, I mean, it's a hypocritical thing to do.
I agree.
But that, that analogy, I always thought that was kind of like that difference between structure and intuition. And I personally, over the wintertime, had to shift that up. I've always been more of a lean guy. And like, I felt kind of in my identity more as like someone with lower body fat. Like, my strength was good, but it was never like maximized or muscle gain, where I'm like, I really wanted to put on some muscle over this past year, and working, with my buddy Tyler. Like, I was eating a lot. I wasn't like getting that cardio, like that conditioning started to go, and it starts to fuck with your head a little bit. Like, where I'm like, oh my God, like it's like, and it's different. And then, a few months ago, got back into kind of like a lean cut and realized like, like put on some muscle and feel really good by doing it. And it's like, you need to go into those different phases. And I think it's known in some ways in health and fitness, but it's not different, I think, in anything that you're doing. If you have a book that's coming out, like, that's the time where you might need to surge in left lane at that point. And then everything else is kind of more right lane. Yeah,
that's great, right? Like, this is something that definitely like we can just apply just within fitness and the different goals, whether you're cutting or adding muscle or whatever. But I want to like zoom way out and be like, no, this is something that you should be using for your life as a whole, right? And different pursuits you have in your life, assuming there's many things you want to pursue. Real quick about the structured intuition, you made a good point there, Mike, right? The reason your intuitions are kind of going off feel, or however you want to call it, I would say, works for you is because they're informed and they're shaped because you've spent the time studying the structures and the principles and following the programs, right? They're kind of shaped or formed intuitions, right? So they're going to be like generally reliable. The problem is like when people just hop in and like, I'm just gonna wing it, man. Well, we don't know what you're doing. Like you just like hand somebody a guitar, like go ahead and wing it. It's going to sound terrible, right? It's going to sound awful.
Yeah.
And even for people who've been in it for a while, like you might be formed and shaped in a certain way, but that doesn't mean like going by feel is always going to work for you. And this I had to learn, because I always, had a great coaches and structures for like strength training and martial arts. But boy, I learned pretty quickly, I can't just like wing it or go by feel when it comes to trying to put on size. Cause like the way I feel just does not align with reality, specifically with eating. Like I would always feel like, oh man, I'm like definitely eating enough. Mm-hmm. But then like you go and you analyze it and you're like, I'm still like 800 calories short of where I need to be. Exactly. Right. So like, even if you're well-formed in like one area or one aspect, that doesn't mean you're going to be generally reliable on others. So it goes back again, like know the rules, get the principles down, have the structure. So that way, your intuitions are well-formed that when, at times you can lift those structures and, kind of feel your way around with at least a moderate degree of success. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a huge point. I made a mistake on that with intuition, working with people. Actually, I think I did a solo podcast about a month ago on this of the things that went wrong in intuition, where when I started doing this for myself, I was like, I feel great. Like I was staying lean, like my energy was through the roof. I'm like, oh my God, this is the way you need to train. Like this, I found like that piece. I was so into it personally and started to work with it of getting into biofeedback work and kind of intuitive training with people who were more at like a beginner phase of getting things in and realizing like, yeah, it sounds very appealing. Like that term flexible, it's one of those words that I think comforts us. Like, oh, I can be flexible with it. When it's like, no, if you're at the beginning stages, like if you need 6 months to maybe a year, like
you need to do your rudiments.
Exactly.
Friend.
Yeah. You
right.
need to get that exactly. And those are, completely, subjective timeframes on it. But if you haven't I found like a year of like structure means that you've stayed consistent through all different seasons of life. Like things have went great, things have went to hell, like all different things have popped up. You've gone through, being sick, all those things. And then you can start to delve into that. And I think I said, like, I personally clouded my own vision of realizing I had over, a dozen years of doing structure for a while before you got to the intuitive.
You had your training, right? You did your rudiments. Again, I always think like, let's think about this in like an example where it would be obvious. Think music, right? It's like, imagine, I'm just like playing guitar for 15 years, which is longer than that for me now. And I just realized, oh man, you know what? When I just like forget learning, all the solos note for note and the structure, and I just improvise, I have so much more fun and it sounds great. And like, I should have been doing this all along. Well, I wouldn't have been able to do that all along. Right. Yeah. That just like wouldn't have been possible. Right.
Yeah.
So like then to go and like recommend that to somebody just starting out would be a complete joke. Right. Uh-huh.
That's interesting. I remember Abel James talked about that with music, and he's like, I still go back to scales, just like kind of going through the scales, and it's that primer. It's like a warm up that you just need to still do, and it's like you said, like it's fun to go into that flow and to create things and try and go into different realms in there, but you can't even arrive in that room until you go through all the other hallways of the structure,
unless you've done the boring basics.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So is there anything kind of with this work in fitness, as you said, it's been a while since there, but kind of getting into it, if you think, is there anything that jumps out of major things that maybe you changed your mind on in fitness over the last decade, things that you held as gospel before that you realize maybe don't hold up as much now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to be honest, I have not read, like, I should go back and reread my original For Dummies book. I haven't done it in a long time. Now, why? Because I always hate writing stuff that I wrote even 2 weeks ago, let alone 2 years ago, right? I just, like, no human could ever write this badly, right? Is always mine.
You're like,
but you know what? It's not like same thing with like music. I hate listening to anything I recorded, 2 weeks ago. It's just, you're always like the most critical of yourself, right? But the truth is like that's how you improve. You do need a review process. So some things I am aware of and I've spoken of before is I don't think there's any like big structural thing that I was like super dogmatic on before. I think I've always had a fairly level-headed approach to fit. Like even with kettlebells, I was never one of those guys like it's kettlebell or die, buddies. Right. I've always been like, hey, this is a great tool. if you're a busy person looking to cover a lot of bases, like you're not going to be able to build a deadlift as big as a barbell or anything like that. But like realistically, for most people, this just makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
Definitely agree with that. Definitely still talk about that. And there's a few things that I think the kettlebell actually does do best, right? Better than a lot of other things, including like complexes and stuff like that, right? But in my original book, there's certain things I would change in terms of exercise selection and programming. So if you go back to my original for Dummies book, you'll just find moves in there that I don't do anymore. I don't recommend them anymore. Circus tricky stuff, like I was doing like one arm chin ups and stuff. I've totally changed my mind on that. That was just young, egotistical Pat Flynn. Like, look what I can do. And I still got the elbow tendonitis to prove it, right? So like dumb stuff like that. And now, fortunately, there's only a few of those things, right? Like one arm chin ups. Or at least if I talk to people about that, like I try to be honest, like, hey, this is kind of a party trick. If you really want to do it, fine, but understand it's not gonna, like, the carryover from this is like nothing, right? And people are surprised like that. Like doing one arm chin ups did not make my overall pull up stronger. It just did it. It was like, it just got me good at that one thing and gave me horrible elbow pain. That's about it, right? So yeah, getting rid of some exercises that I actually don't think have great utility aside from like, oh wow, look what that guy can do. So that's one that stands out there.
That's interesting. It's kind of like the elimination when you start really breaking it down of being like, what's not as useful anymore. I thought about that with pistol squats. Like, I think it's a great thing. You can definitely build up the skill of it, but in regards to real carryover,
they're gone. I don't prescribe them. Yeah. Right.
It's like, I mean, it's complicated. Like most people, you need a lot of hamstring mobility.
Sometimes there's just structural constraints for people. Like they're just never going to be able to do it. So no, to my mind, it's like, again, selection, bang for buck, kettlebell front squats, or even like just split squats, great old fashioned split squats, man. Bulgarian split squats. Love those. So yeah, so stuff like that, like a lot of minor or moderate changes, I guess, in terms of like what I really feel is actually worth it for most people most of the time. And where the juice is worth the proverbial squeeze and stuff like that. And then, other details, things, I'm probably actually a bit more of a volume guy than I would have been, years and years ago.
Sure.
It was, super low rep, very heavy. So now I believe that there's, benefit in exploring all the ranges, right?
Yeah.
There's a place and good to be had from the lower rep, heavy Pavli type of stuff. Great. Right. Yeah. But I've really come to appreciate that, that 6 to 15 rep range, still going heavy. And then of course the 15 plus rep range as well. So I would say I've become more of a generalist in exploring different programming structures than I was in my youth, where it was like really heavy, low rep, and then we'll go do sprints. Right now I have, I think more refined programming where we go through different cycles and phases of stuff like that. So yeah, I'd say there's probably a handful of changes of stuff like in that type of neighborhood that I've if not flipped on, like my thinking is evolved or developed,
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think your body changes too. I remember I talked with Fabio Zonin about that, where like sometimes you can be more of like a low volume person, but your body will switch to adapting more to becoming a high volume person and being like, it's very, I mean, the body's constantly adapting with stuff. And like, I found that too, like actually doing more like sub-maximal load with snatching, like, I learned that a lot from speaking with Tim Almond a bunch, where he can, snatch the 48K for, 10 reps like nothing. Yet he's training with double 20s or a 24. And he's going for like, max range of motion, really working in and dialing in the technique. And I started doing that too. And it actually made a lot of training sessions really enjoyable. Like you can really kind of get in and just kind of stay within that 6 and 7 out of 10 RPE. At all times, and recovery feels different. And before I was the same. It's like, give me something that is that 3 to 5 rep max, but now it's something that you can get more in that higher range and just focus on even like lower volume sets, but just focusing on technique. It just becomes a lot more enjoyable.
Right. Yeah, no, I really resonate with that. That's probably something I've come to appreciate more myself as well. The grooving, the practice, right? Not always redlining even for conditioning. That's another change, in fact, for me, like how I used to think about conditioning and metabolic conditioning. I would say in general, my approach in terms of methodology is the same, but just like all the dials are way turn down, right? Right. Like duration, frequency. It's just like I do it personally, prescribe personally way less than I used to, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I just found you just don't need it nearly as much as what I
Yeah.
used to think you would need. Right. It's now I think of it as like the bourbon to the sauce of a good training program rather than like than like the actual like
I love that
itself. Yeah.
Have you seen any of like Brett's work with iron cardio that he did,
Yeah.
like with the complexes? Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. And he was on my show not too long ago to talk about it. I say not too long ago, but that might have actually been like 2 years ago now. Time is so distorted for me. Yeah.
It's such an interesting story. He's been on my podcast a couple different times on it. And he's been my coach for a million years. And I saw the process of him coming out of, chemo and rebuilding himself up
right.
with this and just trusting that intuition, kind of using the dice roll, but almost kind of getting in that steady state cardio feel with strength training.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Like it's such a cool feeling of getting into, and it can be kind of, like anything, it can get monotonous, it can get boring in there, but as far as like feeling that energy afterwards, like of just like that mental clarity and that mental focus, I think it's one of the best protocols that's really gotten more popularized.
Yeah, Brett's a monster. He's not only just such a gentleman and really extremely bright, but like dang, he's always impressed me with his physical ability.
Yeah, 100. Yeah. So, well, on the flip side of that, instead of changing your mind, we kind of tapped a little bit into that, but kind of, is there anything that jumps out as things that you've really doubled down on over the time? Like, I thought this was good and now this is even better.
Oh, I mean, just strength training in general, right?
Any specific movements? Are there ones that like you're more like favorite? You kind of seem to favor more than others?
Well, like just to reiterate people, my own fitness journey, like I grew up the fat kid, right? And then by high school, I was like, all right, this is kind of lame. I should do something about it. And I started by going to martial arts. And around this time, like when I was really trying to figure things out, I did what anybody who doesn't know what they're doing typically does and start running a lot, right? Start running a lot, doing all the cardio. Like we'd go down the basement and pick up all the books that my mom would buy and never read, and they go in the basement, right? And it was all just like, go run and do Atkins or stuff like that, right? So, but then once my Taekwondo coach got me into weightlifting, like my body like super transformed, right? And so like that was like the aha moment for me. So like from then on, I was like, this seems to be like the magic sauce, right? Like just like lift heavy things and do it for a bunch of reps and make it harder as you go. And of course I've never flipped my mind on that. I've just doubled down on it in the sense that it not only seems to still be working well for me and, all the clients I've worked with, but, the more I've come to appreciate the research side of it, like the more important that really is for health and longevity, especially keeping that lean muscle on, the resistance training as we age. So that's something that I guess, I don't know if I needed to double down on it because very few people are like, Pat, you crazy idiot. You have no idea what you're talking about, right? Most people generally agree. Yeah, it's good to lift weights, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, like I feel more confident in that now, even if some of the details of how I do it have changed. Just that general philosophy of like strength and mobility, right? That's kind of the base of your fitness pyramid, right? Or even like mobility. I always sometimes talk about this fitness food pyramid equivalent, right? Where it's like the bottom is like your vegetables, right? For me, that's mobility and walking every single day. Hard to eat too much broccoli type of stuff, right? You do your wrist circles, you do your original strength, you do your quadruped rotations, all that good stuff, right? And then get outside and preferably outside if you can and walk a bunch, right? Then kind of above that, let's do the resistance training. However you want to fill in the details, somewhere between 2 to 4 times per week. Like I said, for me, busy seasons, it's 2 days a week. When I want to push it harder, it's 3 days a week. But of course, you could spread out the volume more if you want higher frequency or something like that, right? And then at the top, and this is one where I would have, this would not have been the same 10 years ago. I would have put more emphasis on this, but now it's less. That's the kind of conditioning. That's the bourbon to the sauce of the general program. Your complexes, your circuits, your sprints. Now I'm usually myself and advising other people 1 to 2 days a week, 15-ish, maybe up to 30 minutes at most is just like perfectly sufficient. Right. Mm-hmm.
I like that. I like that pyramid in there, especially because the mobility at the bottom, which I think we oftentimes forget. And when we say we, I mean, I did that for a long time where wasn't doing, I thought like, okay, have good functional movement. I'd like you to do a little bit of a warm up. And then as you just go through life, you do get tighter if you do not work on your
Dude.
mobility. And
Yeah.
like all of a sudden, like I started to like, recognize, because, spending a lot more time sitting in a chair doing work, kind of working from home, like all of a sudden that little stuff starts to add up and hips get tight, calves get tight. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden your movements start to really change. And I started adding in just doing some cars again, just kind of some FRC cars. And
Yeah.
it works so well before that I stopped doing it because it works so well. Now it's
Yeah.
like, just make sure that you do it on a regular basis.
Man, it's so true. I mean, I'm sure I would have laughed at myself as a teenager if I would see my future self, but like I have my mobility routine before and after I play guitar now because I'm just like,
Yeah.
guitar hurts me,
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you can make that just kind of like your vitamins of the day and just getting that in, like just keeping that just natural flexibility and movement. Like it's one of those things like you don't realize how much you need it until you start losing it.
Dude, until like your neck seizes up, right?
Exactly.
And you're like, right. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. So I don't know how to give that advice because it was advice that I didn't take as seriously as I should have. Like now, fortunately, I've always had a habit of mobility just from the years of martial arts, but it was not enough for what I actually needed. Right. So I've had to learn that lesson the hard way of like, getting to the point where it's like, okay, I can't turn, so I better start doing something about this. Right.
No doubt. So Pat, dude, did another one. I've loved this conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time and jumping on. And
thank you, man. You make it such an enjoyable and fun time always.
No doubt, man. Congrats on the new book. And I mean, everything that you're doing. If listeners, if you haven't, checked out Pat's stuff, go check out his books. The Pat Flynn Show, which is an amazing podcast, putting in a lot of work and effort into that. And then new fitness book will be on the rise at some point, rolling in. So I really love seeing everything that you put out, Pat. And yeah, just keep doing you, man.
Thank you, Mike.
Absolutely. If people want to check you out, like just they haven't seen you before, what is the best place that they can go and take a look at your stuff?
Yeah. Thank you very much. So for the fitness stuff, a couple of outlets. If you want to get on my email list, which is where most of the action happens, 101kettlebellworkouts.com. That's the numbers 101kettlebellworkouts.com. You'll get a nice little fat, juicy PDF of 101 kettlebell workouts. And that will like link you out to my YouTube and website and all that too. So that'd probably be the central hub. And then if you like the philosophy stuff, you might want to check out my channel, Philosophy for the People, on YouTube.
Awesome. Till next time, brother. Listeners, thank you so much. Catch you on the next one. Peace.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery Seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait, go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.